Okay, it is that time, Avetta and Dende. We're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to say hello to everyone and welcome. Again, keep chatting in the chat if you like. My name is Marcy Peterson. I'm the Technology Administrator at WheatonArts. I'll be off the camera for the remainder of the evening, but I have some introductions and some things to share with you before we get started. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm broadcasting from southern New Jersey, which I recognize as traditionally the land of the Lenni Lenape. This conference, Living Traditions, is part of a 2-year project, Reflections and Expressions. Wheaton Arts is focusing on the cultural heritage of Central and Southern American communities in our area through a 2-year multifaceted programming featuring exhibitions, educational activities, artist residencies, conferences, rituals, music, and dance performances. Visit WheatonArts.org to find out more about the conclusion of this project coming in spring of 2023. Briefly, I just wanted to say that I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or technical questions, that's where you'll ask those. If you would like to ask questions through our host of the artist, Dende, then you'll do that in the Q&A. So try to look around in your meeting controls and make sure you know where the Q&A is. And before we get officially started, programming for this virtual conference is provided by the Down Jersey Folklife Center, a co-sponsored project of the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and Wheaton Arts, with additional support from the National Endowment of the Arts and the National Endowments for the Humanities. We appreciate all of our sponsors. And programs like this are truly possible because of our supporters. They support us through membership, donations, and shopping at shop.wheatonarts.org. We ask that you please consider exploring these options so we can continue to offer these free programs. And you can take a look in the chat for the links. I'll be popping them in there very shortly. I'll give you one more look at the schedule if you didn't see it when you first came in. We're happy to have you all with us today. And I just wanted to remind you that this program continues tomorrow, Saturday, November 12th at 3 p.m. There will be 2 separate recordings in the Wheaton Arts channel, YouTube channel. So I'll also put that link in the chat. And at this moment, I'm going to turn the program over to Dr. Iveta Birgova, and it's my pleasure to do so. Iveta is the Director of Folklife and Cultural Studies at Wheaton Arts. Hi, Iveta.
Hey, Max. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Well, that will be my pleasure now to introduce our first presenter. I'm really, really happy to see Dende here. And I would like to just say a few words, even though people can see them on the screen. I would read them as well, because I know some people have this on their phones and they might not be able to read it. Dende Macedo is a percussionist, singer, composer, teacher, and multi-instrumentalist. He's been a professional musician since the age of 14, when he appeared in the front line of Timbalada Carlinhos Brown Superstar Percussion Ensemble. Since 2001, Dende has been developing his solo career, splitting time between the US and Bahia, and working with his folkloric group, Ologunde, and his flagship band, Dende and Band. Dende have recently performed at various venues, including venues in Canada, in the United States, Malaysia, Greece. He's both international and nationally recognized as a performer, but also it is very important to say that Dende is a teacher He has provided workshops, clinics, and residency programs throughout the US and Brazil at esteemed institutions such as Lincoln Center, the Juilliard School, the Eastman School of Music, and the Peabody Conservatory. He currently teaches regularly in the Philadelphia area. Dende also endorses Latin percussion and recently developed the raw serious thrash snare in collaboration with them. Welcome, Dende.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you, Roberta.
So I will turn it over to you to talk about the recycled sounds and the Brazilian instruments.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Dende Macedo. I'm from Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. I'm very happy to be here to share a little bit about recycled song and also few instruments that I developed, that I make by hand. So I have here, it's like a instruments that we can see the real instruments. Like in Brazil, we have so many drums. So these ones over here specifically inspired me to make like as a Brazilian drums. But also I make different things. A lot of different things with a TV, a toilet, a sink, a tire, a fan, so many things that I found in the street, in the highway. I stop and I collect these materials, objects, and bring home, clean. Sometimes I know exactly what I'm gonna do. Sometimes I research some instruments from different parts in the world, like in Brazil. So this one here, this set here, let's start this performance like this. I'm gonna perform for you guys a little bit, right? And then maybe after 20 minutes, I'm gonna ask if you have any question. So, for example, this one over here, you can see really well, is a huge PVC pipe. See, it's a huge PVC. I used to be a PVC pipe. Now it's a beautiful drums made by rope, And this one, you can compare this one as a bit like the Brazilian, Afro-Brazilian atabaque that we use in our Afro-Brazilian religion, candomblé. So this one you can play by hand, also by sticks too. Check this out. Has a low tuning, you can see. Nice. So, over here, we have a version of the agogo bell, but this is made by a beer bottle. This one over here, I call it the Brazilian tambourine. But this is made by like air conditioned pipes. Yeah, can you believe it? All right. So this one over here is a veja be a Brazilian surdo, a bass Brazilian drums. But I make this one with a trash, candy trash can, a surdo. So nice. This one here, a long time ago, making me believe that I'm an inventor. Because this one here you can see everywhere in the world. It's called the trash snare. All right. Eita, coisa boa. This one over here used to be a gallon of a paint. So I make a veja be the Brazilian repique. You can play with one hand or two sticks or hands, whatever you like. Nice. Let's try now with two sticks. A cuica by PVC, make by PVC. Over here is a veggies a bee, the agogo, Brazilian agogo bells. But this one I make with coconuts. Tuna candy shaker. Beautiful band. If you're over there, you can dance. It's a Friday night. A version of a shakery, a bottle, shakery bottle. Yeah, it's a plastic shakery bottle. I love this one. Beautiful. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So, does anybody has any question for me?
This really was amazing, Dende. Someone says here that they've been dancing the whole time and grateful for cameras off.
Super
So
important.
people seem to enjoy it. It's really, really amazing sound. But would you like to tell us just a few words about your project, Recycle Sounds? I mean, how did it begin? What is it that inspired you to begin with this?
Well, 20 years ago, before I moved to America, I grew up with not much conditions to have my own real instruments. So I used to go to school, come back after school, call all of my friends, hang out, and start to bang in the cars and the streets, collect cans and stuff, and try to make my own instruments. So I started to develop my recycling instruments in Salvador, Bahia, when I was pretty much like 10 years old, 11. So when I moved to New York City, and then I start to see how rich the city, uh, throwing so many great objects in the trash. So I start to see things in the trash and bring home, clean, and get inspired to make some instruments. Sometimes we used to go really well, but sometimes the idea was stress. But then little by little, I start to focus in my vision of God, of the riches give it to me. I start to pay attention to my vision. I start to believing in me after this company, start to sell these drums for me. 7 years ago, 5 years ago, this is it's called the trash snare. It's made by a trash can of the trash. Inside has a metal balls that you can play like an ocean drum. It's come with the adapter as a snare adapter. So you can play like a timbales, like a snare. You can tune it, and it's also sold by Latin Percussion LP, made by Dende Macedo. So what I'm trying to say, after these drums being developed, I start to believe in me more and start to building more and more and collecting more trash in my mother-in-law house, in my friend's house, in my daughter's house, in the street. So recycle song, it's super important project for me because we save. We try to show the people that we need to save the forest, the water, the environment, the ocean, the lakes, the parks. We need to be able to recycle well in home, teach our kids where's a plastic, where's paper, where's metal, the objects. There also, this is important for kids because I also teach kids in schools with the recycle song project. I take recycle song for a week in the schools and teach kids how to make their own instruments. And I tell them about how important to learning to make, for example, a pizza box. A pizza box, I transformed this pizza box for little kids, but inside we have the ocean. This is the easy one that you can make. So I also, my idea is try to bring my own sound. This is not conga song. This is my PVC drumming sound. This is my song. For example, Carlos Santana, he bought the mix with his Latin music, with rock and roll music, and together he's bought his own and his sound. I'm trying to do almost the same, but my sound. The trash can is a drum. The paint, gallon paint is another drum. The coconuts. There's a melodies, coconuts in here too. So different size. So many different instruments, guys. You don't have any idea. I only set up this in my studio to show to be a little bit about the ones that are close about Brazilian instruments. But let me show you a little quick one, super important one, also too, that came from Africa. The real one, Molongo, is coming from Africa. In Brazil, the name is coming to be berimbau. This one's made by PVC pipe. The strings that you see here, it's from the tire, the car tire. You're only gonna find this inside the tire of the car, only. You're not gonna find this in any place. So this is a little kind of like a calabash, but plastic one, pipe calabash. I use a rock and chopstick from sushi, my favorite sushi place. I lied to the guy and say, oh, this is my birthday today, can I have this? And he gave me the chopstick.
Right. Very, very good. Very interesting. Very, very interesting.
All right.
Well, then there are a few more questions that are coming in, so that I wanted to ask you at this time. Marilyn wants to know whether you are following the tradition of others who have made instruments out of found objects. Were you taught to make some, or did you come up with the idea on your own? I mean, you answered part of it, but is there any tradition that you would follow when making those instruments?
Every day before I go to sleep, I research instruments from Bali, instruments from Cuba, instruments from India, instruments from Japan. Everywhere in the world, we have a different kind of voices and sounds and bodies and look and technique and sticks to play. So I'm fascinated with this stuff like that. So I go to research some instruments, and they inspire me. Just like this one here, like I said in the beginning, this one's pretty much a Brazilian version of a Brazilian instruments. So a lot of rhythms also too is helping me to developing this instruments that I developed. So yeah, what I can say. The objects that I found sometimes is very dirty. I don't have any idea what I'm gonna do. So like the toilet. I found the toilet in the street and I make this multiple instruments, different kind of melodies and instruments. It's not here because I make space for my studio. But next time I'm gonna show it to you guys. If you be interested, you can go to my Instagram or Facebook, you can see Dende Macedo, all the instruments in the video for you guys.
Thank you, Dende. Thank you very much. Well, somebody else wants to know when can we see Dende perform locally? Maybe you can share, or Leslie can share in the chat some upcoming programs that people can attend.
Yes, definitely. We're supposed to performance, but was canceled and a few months ago. But definitely, when we have any shows coming up, I let you guys know. Please leave your email or something that we can be sending to you the information. You also can listen because I'm recording a album. It's called Recycle Sound, Volume 1. To Spotify, and can listen what I'm talking about sound, about my sound. You're gonna hear some incredible scary tracks, beautiful tracks, meditation tracks, only with recycling instruments.
Well, Marcy just shared in the chat your website. Maybe people can write it down and follow on Facebook or Instagram and see for upcoming performances. So we have this in the chat. And one last question at this time, then Michael is asking how many people would be playing in a typical samba ensemble. That is just to provide some context on how many instruments you need to make in order to have the entire ensemble, because it is so impressive how many instruments you have made and how much they sound like the instruments that are made conventionally.
All right, great. Mike, you say Mike or Michael?
Michael Esposito.
Michael, okay, Michael. So Michael, if you can start with 3 surdos, you know, like the big drums in one repique in one snare, you have the basic of a Brazilian samba or any kind of style that you want to put together. Make sense?
Maybe you can just speak about what is a part of a samba ensemble. What kind of instruments are typically included?
All right. So, Michael, I'm from Salvador, Bahia, Brazil, in the Northeast. A lot of Africa influence, a lot of miscegenation, a lot of religion, Yorubas, and history over there. The samba coming from Bahia, developing in the South, in Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, in other parts of Brazil. Clear? So, what I can tell you, in Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, they play samba enredo, whereas the school sambas play, all right, in the carnival. So they have the surdos. They have the surdo. I play for you a little bit, okay? So you have the surdo. Sorry. Wrong button. Sorry. So I was saying you have the surdo. And then you bring the snare. It's very groove. You bring the agogo bell, agogo bell. You bring the shakers, no? And then they have Piki, the leader drums. É isso aí.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. There's a little bit about the Brazilian samba. Brazil is so big, and we have so many different kinds of sambas, so many different kind arrangements, styles, breaks, techniques, history, because this rhythms is a very important rhythms. For example, this is a cone, a traffic cone. A month ago, I traveled to Africa, to Nigeria, to play in a celebration week. And in Nigeria, this drums in Africa is very strong. It's called the talking drums. It's the spiritual, traditional, strong drums. But this one is recycled, you can see. All right? Let me play a little bit for you. Let me get this sticky here for you. Give me 1 second. Right here. Okay. So this is a different style of the instruments that I make also, okay? I want to show it to you. Very important instrument in Africa. So the person speak in Yoruba language. Dodo ufa o. Bebe dum bebe. Zedula, zedula. A coconut jingle, shake it. A shaker, constructor, hard hat. Propane tank, hang drums. That's beautiful. For the car type. A jar. Who do drums?
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Woo. All right, thanks so much, everybody. This is Dede Macedo, straight from Philadelphia. A pleasure to be here today, share a little bit about my world, my music, my instruments. Recite Song is very important project for me because I can bring this to the school to teach the kids. I can save the world, I can save the beach, the highway, the streets, and teach the people that it is possible to be creative. It is possible to put your idea out and believe in you. Thank you so much. Is there any question?
Well, we have about 15 minutes for a few more questions, but you can't imagine how many appreciative words there are in chat. People really admire your talent and the way you perform alone. You're the man orchestra. There was one person, Danielle, I think, wanted to hear the combination of all sounds together like an ensemble, but I think you combine enough of them.
Yeah, well, this is a good point. I forgot to tell also, in the workshops that I do in the school and the performance that I do, I use the recording loop machine. It's a recording loop machine. Has a 3 channels. It's right here on the floor. And play for 3 hours. And recording for 3 hours. So, for example, if I place number 1, pax catim pax pax catim pum pax catim pax pax catim pum pax catim. Press number 2, catim pum pax catim pax catim pum pax catim pax catim pum. Press number 3, pax catim pum pax catim pax catim pum pax catim pax catim. So then I can be able to be like in a studio, recording track by track, one by one. So I also can doing different tempos too. I can be using different tempo, doing effects, all this stuff. But I don't using too much effects because I think the effects supposed to be my instruments. I only recording and I'm building a beautiful sounds and tracks and ideas. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. People appreciate it. Not only you make these instruments yourself, but you play them and you create such a great music with them, which is really phenomenal. Then there was one question that I didn't ask you before that came from Amalia. She asked whether the pandemic affected your practice.
No. Nothing. The pandemic didn't affect nothing in my life. The pandemic teach me a lot of things, a lot of good things. I start to get to be more father, more husband. I did a CCP. I teach it during the pandemic. I save money.
Yeah, but you began teaching virtually instead of in person, right?
I was now in person, but I was working almost every day. It's something very new for me, but I did. So that's what I'm trying to say. That didn't affect me practicing. Didn't affect me to anything. I learned so much things during this pandemic in my life. I know it was devastating. See many people dying, very dangerous, risky to be any place, not go out, not play for many years. But try to be strong, practicing. That's why I have almost 300 instruments. Because in the middle of the pandemic, I started developing. It was my dad. I started developing many instruments. So yeah, it did not affect me too much.
Well, actually, they did something positive to you, gave you some time to create more instruments.
I'm a positive person anyway. You need to be positive. We need to be positive. We complain about many things in the world. And then when you go outside this world, you see how really people struggle. People really needing to eat, electricity, water, medicine, love. That's why you don't see it. So we need to be positive. It's hard, it is hard, but you need to find a way in your heart to be positive.
That's interesting because these are words that I've heard from other artists as well, that during the pandemic, they found some more aspects of their work that they didn't have time to find before. So to many artists, there was something positive in all the bad things happening around.
It's not easy. Like I say, not easy.
Not easy at all.
So
there was another question. Therese wanted to know whether you can play behind the vocalist in a band.
We back vocals?
Someone who is singing.
Someone is singing. What's the question again? I didn't understand. Ask the question again, please.
She's asking whether you can accompany with this instrument someone who is singing.
Of course, to sing and to play, to dance. And also I can give it to choosing. Like I said, this is not all my instruments. This is a little bit, few ones. There's a many different sets that'll be perfect for the singer, for the piano, for the violin, or for I am ready for the orchestra. That's my dream. I want to see me play in a big orchestra with all my instruments and play together. That's my dream, one of my dreams. So why not? I can play accompaniment with anything. With these instruments, yes.
Yes, you can. Well, but you sing yourself, right?
Yes, I'm a singer. I play guitar a little bit.
Can you give us one example? Can you sing something with the drum?
On the drums, Baba Oshe, Epe Baba, Baba Oshe, Epe Baba, Baba Oshe, Baba de luz, Baba de fé, Baba da paz, conta blanca no pescoço, Baba Oshe, Epe Baba, Baba Oshe, Epe Baba, Baba Oshe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is excellent. Well, we have a few more questions coming in the Q&A box. I see someone wants to know what is your favorite instrument. It shows up here as anonymous.
This is a very difficult question for me.
It is, isn't it?
Very difficult question because I grew up with not much condition, like I said in the beginning. So every little, small, big instrument, you can feel it, you can see it. I show my love for each one. It's hard to say to you. I'm so sorry. I don't can answer this question right now, but I can tell you that I love all of my instruments.
Yeah, maybe that's the fair answer, all of them.
Oh, no.
instead of yeah. Well, Teresa wants to know, do you keep track of your notes to reproduce the same song, or is it always free playing?
The street, say it again?
Do you keep track of your notes so that you can play again the same song, or is it always
Sometimes
improvised?
depends the situation, you know. If I need to recording, I need to recording. I put a pen drive here and pass to my computer and then pass to my Pro Tools session, and I can work in a different session. I work here in my studio doing like a tracks for movie. Okay, if you're anybody interested, track for moving, music for meditating, all different kind of music. I produce it here in my studio because I have all this beautiful 300 different voices that I developed here. So it'd be much easy to do anything, anything. And it also safe. I mean, do so many projects. I save my notes. You know, I keep, I try to save the ideas. When I really like, I save the ideas.
All right. Thank you, Dende. We have a question from Gail Andrew. She wants to know more about the string instrument that you used. She recalls seeing it before on a holiday in the area, but I think Michael said it was called berimbau, if it is the same. Can you tell us more about this instrument?
Which one?
The string instrument that you used when you were singing.
Oh, this instrument here has many ones. This is a different one by PVC. You know, chicken trees, bowl, Halloween in the trash. Okay, has
Mm-hmm.
a bass string, different sound. So this instrument comes from Africa, man. With the different name, as a be malongo, malongo. In Brazil, the name is coming to be berimbau, because this is the instrument that we're using in the martial art, capoeira.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we do this, we play the music, you know, for the capoeira game with this instrument. You play with one stick, one rock, sometimes one shake it, it's called the cachixim, you know. Yeah, and then you make the notes happen, you press the rock, leave the rock. Rock, out of the rock. So also in Africa, this instrument, they also call this instrument the mouth berimbau.
Mm-hmm.
This one might recycle one with the tuna thing. So you can play, use your mouth like this. Okay?
That is great. That is great indeed. So this is the berimbau, and Amalia also suggested maybe it has another name, Sim, if this is the name.
Yes, many names, many names.
So
Mozambique, Angola has a different names. Yes, probably 6, 7 different names of these instruments have been developing in the world.
all right, and we have time for one more question. Teresa is asking, do you make any instruments from natural materials like wood, for instance?
Yes, yes, very good and interesting question, because I was research about the berimbau in Africa. This is for my trees outside. My tree outside. This is the real berimbau of the mouse berimbau. This is a goat skin. clean one, of course. You have to clean to use. So they play in Africa like this. The same way that you saw me, they play the mouse in here and they play with the stick over here. So yes, I make instruments with some natural stuff. Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you so very much, Dende. This was amazing. Do you have some concluding remarks to make for the people, and we'll wrap it up?
Well, thanks so much, for inviting me to do this. I always feel very happy to be able to share a little bit, recycle song, my ideas, my instruments. I love to do this. I'm gonna continue to do this. I'm gonna continue to teach it. And then you should believe in your ideas. You should believe in you. And you should believe in that you can develop your own instruments at home. Like I say, get your kids, be productive. Get 2 cups. Put some rice beans inside. Wrap with tape and make a nice shake it. So be creative. Stop to be in a TV and a cell phone and computer too much. That's what I say to you guys. Love you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Dende. Thank you, really. You just inspired someone to make instruments. Amy said she has ceramic classes and she'll make some instruments out of clay. She was just inspired.
What kind of objects she has?
Clay, ceramic classes, pottery.
Definitely. With anything.
Yeah, to just make some instruments in the pottery classes.
Yes, making a poster in my Instagram for I can see it. This is be really nice. Continue to make your own instruments. It'd be nice.
Amy, I hope you heard that. So then they will be waiting for the result of your efforts in the pottery class and the instruments.
You guys can follow Dende Macedo, Instagram, Dende Macedo, Facebook, YouTube, Dende Recycle Song, Spotify. You can listen. Very nice, beautiful music, making for objects and recycling instruments. Thank you, guys. Is there any more question?
No, we are wrapping it up. Thank you very much again. It was amazing, Dende.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, so please let me welcome our second presenter tonight. We are moving to another very, very amazing presentation by Amalia Cordova. Amalia is a supervisory museum curator and chair of research and education at the Smithsonian Institution Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. She co-directs the Mother Tongue Film Festival, a project of the Smithsonian's Recording Voices initiative. She was a Latin American specialist for the Film Plus Video Center of the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian and taught at New York University's Gallatin School of Individualized Study. Her more recent essays have appeared in Media Cultures in Latin America, Key Concepts and New Debates, From Filmmaker Warriors to Flash Drive Shamans, Indigenous Media Production and Engagement in Latin America, The Rutledge Companion to Latin American Cinema, and In the Balance, Indigeneity, Performance, Globalization. Amanda holds an MA in Performance Studies and a PhD in Cinema Studies from the New York University. She is from Santiago, Chile, Waumapu. We will hear about Waumapu in a few minutes. Welcome, Amalia. I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight and to follow Dende Macedo. Thank you so much. Obrigada. Wonderful musical presentation. And we're going to continue on the topic of sound. So sound in the Americas. I want to acknowledge first that we're here in Washington, D.C. We are on Piscataway territory, and the relationship of the Piscataway Nation continues to the lands around the Chesapeake Bay and west of the Chesapeake Bay until today. And I want to give thanks to the filmmakers whose work I'm showing and the wonderful artists, the Mapuche hip hop artists whose work makes possible the expansion of the Mapuche thought, the Mapuche language, and the concepts contained within that. And to the scholars that have also been working on this to make it more known, and to WheatonArts for having us today. Walmapu is the name for the ancestral Mapuche territory and consists of a strip of land from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean in the southern cone of South America. And it is presently known as a third of Chile and Argentina. This is the territory, the ancestral territory of the Mapuche nation. And Walmapu is the name the whole territory has, but the part that's in Argentina receives the name Puelmapu, and the part that is now present-day Chile receives the name Ngulumapu. And today in Chile, the Mapuche are the largest of non-recognized indigenous nations, 1.8 million out of a country that has a population of 19 million. And in Argentina, although the official estimate is 113,680 out of 45 million, there may be other estimates that the indigenous peoples themselves are tracking that are not making it into the official countings. The Mapuche nation has resisted the invasion of the Inca Empire, the arrival of the Spaniards, then the constitution of the country called Chile and its expansion into the Mapuche territories. And so there has been the development of a culture of resistance, the deep-rooted concept of autonomy, and that autonomy is completely embedded in the idea of the land. This resistance has been possible because of the linguistic and cultural unity of the Mapuche nation. Although there are variants, the language is spoken across all of this Walmapu territory, and the cultural practices, the traditions, are similar, although it is not a centralized, it's not an empire, mentality, but a way of doing things that replicates across the Mapuche territory with its own cultural specificities. So I do want to signal that the Mapuche nation is in no way homogeneous, but it has this unity, this linguistic and cultural unity. However, in Chile, I'm going to speak for Chile, for the part of Ngulumapu, the manifestation of the assertion of the right of the Mapuche to hang on to their traditional territory, land, and lifeways has been met with repression, and they are very criminalized in the mainstream media. And this was particularly strong when more neoliberal policies were implemented during the dictatorship of Pinochet. And there were, of course, protests against the extractive multinational incursions into Mapuche territory. So by just expressing their visions and their cultures, they were repressed. And there has been a real criminalization of any kind of Mapuche cultural expression and organization and political movement and public action. And that's met with the very serious application of anti-terrorist laws that were created also during the dictatorship, but perpetuated by the democratic government that followed. And this leads to the persecution and unfair arrest and assassination of a lot of the leaders. What we're seeing here in this image is the funeral of Camilo Catrillanca, which is one of a long line of resistors, land defenders, we would call them today, and mostly young men who get caught in the crossfire. And in all the situations of land occupations, reclamations, or protests where there has been this kind of violence, no one in the Mapuche side has been armed. So it's been really unfair. It's been an opposition of really heavy state military repression against a very deeply rooted traditional people that unify and stand up against them. So this is the backdrop under which Mapuche people decide to take control of their own media and start producing radio and print and creating their own documentation through documentary work, making films, making videos. Particularly the arrival of video technology allows people to create short videos that circulate in a way that long, heavy films cannot, or that the television that's not representing the Mapuche struggle or misrepresenting the Mapuche idea and the Mapuche people. With their own media, Mapuche can tell their own story in their own terms. And that includes a lot of the use of the language and the cultural elements that eventually will end up in the hip hop videos that we're going to see soon. So here I just have some exponents of some of the different kind of Mapuche media. We have the print media such as Askintue, radio such as WheatonArts, and a wealth of documentary folks that I'm going to just run through a few of them to get a sense of what that looks like. So here we have the first exponent of Mapuche video. The first kind of well-known Mapuche directed film is When Yo Me Turni Mapumeo, Return to Earth by Jose Ancan Jara. It's a 25-minute film from 1994. And Jose Ancan, who's an artist, a scholar, and he's now the deputy director of the Office of Original Peoples for the Chilean government's National Service of Cultural Heritage. So he's actually my colleague, but he began in video work as well. And he's now gone on to implement policy and work with indigenous peoples and craft a kind of cultural policy for indigenous people, including the Mapuche. Then we have one of the major figures of indigenous film is Janet Payan. In 1997, the Endesa, which is the biggest, the largest electric company in Latin America, began building a massive hydroelectric dam called Ralco in the upper Biobío River, which is a traditional territory of the Pehuenche people, which are part of the Mapuche nation. So Punalca, El Alto Biobío, the upper Biobío, was made in 1995, and it's an experimental documentary, not an expose or a newsreel. And that was directed by Janet Payan, who's a journalist who's Pehuenche, and produced by her collective, the Grupo de Estudios de Comunicación Mapuche Lulul Mawida. So we see immediately the emergence of collectives, not just individual actors. And it is narrated through a poem in the Mapuzungun language, and I'm going to show just a little bit of it.
Kuifimel mutachima punie funyi pali. Piene ukinyi went. Pungin ke mapu, nghienko, ngien mawisa. Witayo ke fui fa plienan. Wekuna munkia wikraf. Wilkulero tokifin. Amui wenyi mawisan tuple.
So what we see here is not, like I said, an expose and not a journalistic accounting. It's a real cultural approach that really situates you in the land, makes you listen to the language, feel the natural sounds, the birds. It opens with traditional Mapuche music. The pifilca is a flute made out of wood that plays one note. And the drum we're hearing under the chanting is the cultrun. It's the sacred Mapuche drum that is used in all kinds of ceremony. And the song is a petitioning. So we're already hearing the importance of Mapuche sound, of Mapuche cultural elements within the early films. And the same happens with the films of a musician and wonderful exponent of the Mapuche culture, Sofia Painequeo. Later, now we're in 2001. And this is an epic representation of the history of the emergence of the Mapuche people told through a creation story. And this is also an experimental film. It's not a documentary. I'm going to play a little bit of that.
Mupunai chemai ngene mapun apomita fil rume mongen mapumeu feichidungu kimlafi nyinchinta in mapushengen. chakui fi peam honemu petung elai che reka kerume mongen muten peam mleke fui mapumeu feula e peure ke netambia tu fin tain kimela fiel kui fi ke dungu pu cheke chenge alu chumwechi tain choyingen inchin tain mapuchengen chemur am mapuche pingein cheu tain tipapan.
And this is the sacred drum, the kultrun, that I was mentioning. And it paints the four directions and invokes the heavens and also the earth and the wind because it's got air inside. So all the elements are inside the drum, and the drum opens the film. The film opens with the call of a chuchuca, which is a long horn instrument that is used to call people to gather to meetings. And the narration is in Mapuzungun, again, in the language of the Mapuche people, and talks about long ago, before there were humans, there was this other kind of diverse life, and how did we come to be here? How did we become Mapuche, and why are we called Mapuche? So that's what the whole documentary is about. All right, so before we go into, I just want to show the continuity of how these cultural elements from the Mapuche traditional music make their way into contemporary expression. So I'm just going to play a little bit of an audio of a recent release by a Mapuche hip-hop artist called Guayquil, featuring traditional singing by Carmen Curical Ñanco.
Empresario forestal, mira te lo digo de este modo. Eres perro ambicioso y mereces este apodo por robar y talar todo nuestro bosque nativo, instalando plantaciones industriales de pino y eucalipto que producen exterminio natural de la flora, de la fauna, nuestra tierra ancestral. Hasta yencos y esteros disminuyen su caudal. Muchas familias mapuche sin agua elemental. Esto es el día a día de la zona rural.
Okay, so what we see here in the band, we have the instrument that was mentioning, the chuchuca, on the left. Then we have some contemporary, have a violin, which is a contemporary instrument. Then we have the drum, the kultrun, and a shaker with bells. And all of this we could hear in the song. And then a couple of modern instruments such as the guitar and the bass, you know, kind of rock instruments. So these are all being combined today in some of the Mapuche hip hop. So we have a variety of different expressions of Mapuche hip hop, and I wanted to make sure that I included women in hip hop. And I want to hang on to some of the things we've mentioned here. We've talked about denunciation, assertion of rights. We've talked about creative language that uses poetry and that uses musical form. So I want to talk about this one really interesting musician. Her name is Jazz, and she is a hip hop artist based in Santiago, Chile, and grew up without the cultural backdrop. Her family never acknowledged to her, never brought her into the tradition. And this is not uncommon that families that migrate really want to leave behind any association to the indigenous world they come from, because they don't see an advantage to it. They are facing discrimination and marginalization. But Jazz, whose name is Jennifer Andrea Aguilera Silva, really was interested in reconnecting. So she started listening to Mapuche radio programs broadcast in the city, and thus began to teach herself her own language. She became involved in this hip hop world, this emergent hip hop world, in her early 20s. And she started working with a producer in the late 90s. And she has since produced one of the first videos that I came across about around 2003, 2002 or 2003. And it combines material from documentaries about the repression of Mapuche people, documentaries that talk about the cultural tradition, and they also record part of this video in the land, on the territory of the Mapuche nation.
Newentu, Namuntu, Mapu, 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 Mapu. ¿Cuántos años en agresión? Más de 500 en opresión. El pueblo mapuche será resucitado. Persistentes en la lucha, la vida han ganado, protegiendo y velando a los sabios y sus generaciones. El letargo no calma al guerrero, lo alimenta con proeza para seguir en terreno. Una nación que ama con destrezas, entre troncos se adiestra la rudeza, valentía, valor, une los sentidos. El viento arrastra todo lo dormido, golpe violento, aceleran el ruido. Victoria se escuchará en el cielo, la libertad vendrá con vuelo. Lucha persistente, sí, hasta la muerte. La noche descansa, ancestros se levantan. Comunidad mapuche, entre todos se abrazan. El puño en alto, la cabeza lleva el contacto, el salto. Amor de verdad les entrego en mi canto. Fuerza y honor agudizan los sentidos. El viento arrastra todo lo dormido. Nochita kimun pelon ranquipio que arrancan. Feini kufunamu tanto fatenti weitan. Weitan, 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 weitan. Hinchin tawitale. Patuaita y weitan. Tufati guaria. Non comeo tameuka. Non fica calor. Ni eluta kimunitin. Pediento kimi ni eluta mi kuifi folil. Molfun, mondiente kapali ke wan. Unyu mongen puli wenu. Dale antu. Inyeru puto alunchin ne wentu. Tompu weni. Taji luz katuain. Hip hop, hip hop, hip hop de un cheta jaspa. Citrocon, tubiu que meu. Ne wentu, namuntu. Mapu, mapu, mapu. Mapu, mapu, mapu. Mapu, mapu, mapu. Nochita kimukelon. Ranking piu que rankan. Feini kufuna mutuan. Tu fata in chin weichan. Weichan, weichan, weichan. Weichan, weichan, weichan. Lucha, lucha hasta la muerte. Newentu, Namuntu, Mapu, pisando fuerte la tierra.
So Yvette, I don't know if we want to take a pause at this point. You might have questions. I just wanted to mention that this video was shot in a Mapuche territory with consultation from the leadership of that community. It was collectively directed by an American filmmaker, a Mapuche hip hop artist, and the leadership of a community. It juxtaposes Mapuzungun in Spanish, and we screened it at a festival, so that's why we have an English version. And it also juxtaposes the rural and the urban. It highlights the cultural traditions of Mapuche food, the river, different concepts. Mapu means land, that is the chorus. We heard it also in the work of Sofia Painekeo. We heard the title of the video is Newen, and that means life force. And again, it begins also juxtaposing different sounds that are both from the kind of hip hop loops with the sounds of some of the traditional instruments, including the chuchuca, just like some of the other works that we've played. It is the call to come listen.
That is very, very interesting, Amanda. Even we have a comment in the chat that says that Danielle, she loves the combination of history and music in the videos, and jazz song is amazing. And we have a question. Michael is asking, please explain the relationship between the Mapuche and the Tehuelche.
So the Tehuelche are a group that is still part of the Mapuche territory in Argentina, in the Puel Mapu. They inhabit the more southern part, and I have to say, if you look at the numbers, there was a real push to eliminate the Mapuche and the Tehuelche in Argentina. The numbers are much lower, and the process of recognition and rights has also been very fraught. So Chile is a smaller country, smaller population, and a very high percentage of that population is acknowledging that they are Mapuche, indigenous, but mostly Mapuche is the highest number of indigenous people in Chile. Whereas in Argentina, for I would say easily hundreds of years, what was said and taught in the schools and the general public thought there were no native people in Argentina, and Argentinians, weren't connected to that heritage. And so that has been a real struggle because of also the geography. And then the economy of Argentina, it's different from Chile. And so in that sense, their land was razed and taken away. And that has made survivance on your own terms extremely difficult. So that's the Tehuelche Nation, south of the Mapuche.
Right. So, well, Mapuche people live in both Chile and Argentina, and Tehuelche are only in Argentina. Is that right?
Pretty much. Mapuche people are living in a lot of places now, even in New Jersey.
Yes, we know that. We know that.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. And we have another question from Marilyn. She's asking, have these videos helped revitalize the Mapuche culture? Did it make the older and younger generations more aware, more proud?
Absolutely. I can unhesitatingly say that yes, and that, for example, a traditional performer and exponent of traditional Mapuche music like Sofia Painequeo, she made a film because she wanted the younger generation to connect to that. I mean, this film was released more than 20 years ago. This short clip was already made 20 years ago. So meanwhile, in those 20 years, and that's what I want to get to, we've had a real explosion of hip hop in indigenous languages. And in the case of Chile in particular, Mapuche hip hop, which has taken on an incredible amount of musical genres that it is mixed with. So what I first played by Guayaquil is more of a rap on top of a Mapuche bass. What Jazz is doing is she's rapping in the language, not just the bases in the language, but she is learning the language so she can also rap in the language. And that's been a huge motivator for the new generation to be able to express themselves through hip hop, not in Spanish. And that generates a real genuine interest in learning about the culture and specifically learning the language, because the traditional music is in the language and the way petitioning happens is in the language. So the language is the portal to much else. And increasingly, these the youth in the urban centers can learn the language in the city, and it's being taught in the university now as well.
So how many people would you say, I mean, percentage know the Mapudungun?
I don't know if that's been measured. Again, it's a rather new phenomenon of it being taught in universities, and there's a lot of the education is informal education. Even Zoom through the pandemic, a lot of even academics who are studying this material and studying Mapuche culture, Mapuche history, any kind of Mapuche cultural expression are also learning the language. And some of them hire the instructors via Zoom to teach them. So it's really been a recent phenomenon. You know, I would say the last 10 years have been a game changer in how the language is now really part of the fabric in the country and not something from the countryside and marginalized.
That is amazing. That is amazing that is happening. This process is really interesting because so many indigenous people have lost language and trying to revitalize culture without the presence of the native language, and it's been difficult. So this is really good. And one last question, Amalia, before we can move forward, and if there are other questions, I will answer them at the end. Michael is asking, is Katarina Ross named in the movie Newen Life Force the same actress from the 1967 movie Graduate?
No. Catherine Ross is a documentary filmmaker from Chicago, and she lives in Chile now.
Oh, okay. So it's a different person.
Yes, it's a different person.
And I'm sorry, but just one last question. Is the language being taught in schools now?
Yes, it's being taught in schools in Mapuche territory, where there's a push to do bilingual education for the communities themselves. But I don't think it's reached the level of being taught across the public school system or the private school system in the capitals or in the bigger cities. I think it's still seen as a special interest, like a niche thing. But it is being taught in the university.
At the university, but not in the schools, let's say in Santiago.
No, not to my knowledge, but what is happening
as an elective.
But there has been a citywide effort to start bringing Mapuche educators to work in the schools to first create sensitivity around the awareness of the culture, and just educate Chilean youth about Mapuche culture. So that first step is happening. The city schools, district school system is hiring Mapuche certified, qualified educators who are Mapuche, who are experts in intercultural education. So it's not just about the Mapuche learning the Mapuche language. It's about people living in Chile being conversant with Mapuche culture as an incredibly important cultural, culture that's informed what Chile is today. And that is an important culture that resisted the arrival of Spaniards, Incas, and other forces that wanted to invade their territory. So it has been unfortunately seen as a conflict. And what the new constitutional assembly was proposing, that there really be the idea of a plurinational state in Chile, but there's been a lot of resistance to that.
So still complicated.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Amanda. Let's continue now, and I will read you all the rest of the questions as they come in at the end.
Sure. So I'm just going to show a couple more musicians because I'd like to emphasize the idea of diversity within the Mapuche hip hop universe and how it's cross-pollinating with other musical forms. So we have one artist who is Gonzalo Luanco, and he is a history teacher precisely in the school system in Santiago, in the capital of Chile, in a borough that's very popular. And because he's a history teacher, he saw the importance of informing these youth who are indigenous growing up in the city, reconnecting them to their own history and language. So he is rapped in Mapuzungun, he's rapped in Spanish, and I'm going to show a little clip about who he is, and then I'm going to show a tiny clip of one of his films. And this clip is courtesy of a project called Encoded Textiles, and made by Anthony Rald and the artist Guillermo Burt.
Helei marimai piafin compuche al cutulu tofachi zongun meu inche Gonzalo Luanco Castro Piñén mapuche ta inche tremun fao tofachi guardia meu Santiago guardia meu huelu comta inche huyi mapu meu cupai. Como lo decía en mi presentación, yo me crié en una población donde lo primero que vi fue alcohol, drogadicción, salí a la calle y empecé a hacer música. Y cuando empecé a hacer música, conocí el hip hop y comprendí también la potencia que tenía el mensaje de poesía rítmica, rapeado, que no era necesario hacerlo con instrumentos, sino se hacía con beatbox, con aplausos, con sonidos de la boca, etc. Y ahí en un momento el hip hop pasó a ser parte de mi herramienta de defenderse dentro de la baja autoestima que hay en la población como jóvenes mapuches, donde hay una súper baja autoestima, donde incluso da vergüenza y a muchos peñas les da vergüenza decir que son mapuches.
Es simple, la felicidad es algo simple. Deja de creerte el elegido y sé sensible, humilde, porque es lo que nos sirve, así nuestra cultura.
So that's a little slice of life from Luanco. And so you see a full-fledged produced video about his work. Here we go with Yamkin. Respect always.
Mari pukuifi que che yen wenu mapumeo, wenu mapuchao, wenu mapuñuke. Mile pa inak mapumeo, inka que inta ini trofilmongen, inka que inta in kuifi que no cham kuifi que sumuta in ki buen petum le pa iguaria meu lel funmeo. Ne wento mule peta in mongen. Yo. Tani mapuyam ke, ruf mongen, tani mapuyam ke, ruf mongen, tani mapuyam ke. Mongen, come ci pape ta in kusau feita ke yual. Tani mapuyam ken, tani mapuyam ken, tani mapuyam ken, tani mapuyam ken. Ko pape na wenta mun kume ke raki swam. Ko pape les punta in tekan kume amual. Ko pape ki mun fil ke mongen jam nial. We tapayan mai. Jam ken ikaken, ito fil mongen wef tu ken. Chuple mi oken manyum tu ken, tani ruf mongen. Jam ken ikaken, ito fil mongen wef tu ken mi ya tu ken mai. Chuple amuken inche yam ken, fei muchali ken. Chuple muleken wei cha tu ken, inche inka ken. Chuple amuken inche yam ken, fei muchali ken. Ni ya tuan mai.
There we go. I'm sorry to cut these. I would love to have them dropped in the chat so people can watch them in full. This is a song that's made with Afrobeat and dancehall, as well as rap in Mapuzungun. So it's about, the chorus says, I respect my land. And it's shot like you see, even though he's dressed in his urban clothes, he's back on the land. So we see all kinds of juxtapositions of Mapuche culture in the city and in the country, but also urban dwelling Mapuche youth, not just in the city, but also back to the land. And I think that's a really important element. Next, we have an artist I'm currently working with, Waikil. He is an exponent of this new wave that I'm talking about of Mapuche rap music and hip hop. He was raised in Traiguén in the south in the Mapuche territory. He now lives in Santiago, where he's involved in many musical projects and talks about the everyday experience of people in urban areas. Out of the interest of time, I'm not going to show Tain Wiringtun Mapuche, our Mapuche writing, but it is a hip hop, a song that talks about contesting Mapuche notions of education, which are oral and lived in community, with how children or youth are taught in the city Chilean history and a history that marginalizes them. And that's a common recurring topic of a lot of the hip hop artists. His band, his current project, which I'm very honored to be showing in another space that I'm working with, is an intercultural project. And it brings in Mapuche musicians, but also musicians that are playing instruments such as the violin and guitar and bass. But I really think this kind of work embodies this idea that it's not just Mapuche culture for Mapuche, but inviting people in. And the invitation is very literal, because this video is part of an acoustic session, a bit like Tiny Desk, right? It's an acoustic session that's recorded inside of the traditional lodging of the Mapuche, which is called the ruca. So these recordings are called sessions in the ruca, live in the ruca. And that's the recordings he's making are about to become an album. You can find this online. They have released about 6 tracks so far. They're working on a full-length album, but this is a song called Trafkintun. And Trafkintun is a mode of exchange. It's inspired by Mapuche singing, Mapuche traditional song that's called Ulcantun. And this song is a call to strengthen the practice of exchange, which still happens in some parts of the Mapuche territory where families get together to share and exchange not only material things, but knowledges. So this is an invitation to immaterially exchange knowledges.
Quintún, práctica social que nos relaciona como pueblo, como raza, nuestro corazón fusiona y funciona intercambiando sabiduría y voluntad, entregando lo mejor en nuestra reciprocidad, apañando en forma solidaria, ejercicio sano, todo ayudan a uno y uno devuelve la mano en la siembra, la cosecha, nuestro actuar sincero, valemos un peño, una alamien bueno y que tener dinero. El trap Quintún es cariño, aprecio si alguien que se estima, intercambia nuestro trabajo que con las manos se cultiva y compartir tomando mate, haciendo mil según con curry y wink-off que en una recuperación donde no hace falta la plata, signo peso en la frente como centro comerciales donde se endeuda la gente porque rompe con el modelo económico consumista, donde el euro y el dólar se pelean por ser protagonistas. Trafkin tu mule alum, tu fachima pumu, mule y kume rakido en café y mule y kume dumun, compartiendo de piuque. Así es este tragún, toda mi gente intercambiando, haciendo trap Quintún. Capitalismo egoísta, usurero, estafador, su dinero, su fortuna aquí no tienen valor, ya que el valor más importante es el adoptar las cosas simples, gesto amable, irreemplazable, de corazón inquebrantable, como pacto de amistad, con mi trafkin, compartiendo un kimun, kinkimun, un palín, contando de nuestra cultura como visión, nuestra raíz, hablando de nuestra familia, nuestro wifi, origen de donde viene nuestra hermandad, humildad que fortalece nuestra identidad, palabras verdaderas de Piuque que se vinculan, y en esta estrofa las escribo con mayúscula hacia la forma mutua fraterna con la que nos regimos, hacia un hermano, hacia la tierra en el lugar donde vivimos, agradeciendo con ofrenda respetuoso un yipun por el buen que nos otorga la Mapu en su Traf Quintún mule alu tu fachima pumu mule kume.
All right. So I know we're almost at time, but I do want to talk about another kind of reversal that I have seen through this this movement, which is the idea now of sharing the language of hip hop, which is a global language, and sharing it in spaces outside of Latin America. So these artists are traveling and they're meeting other hip hop artists. So there's a video that was shot in Hamburg in 2019 when Jazz, whose video we saw earlier, and her collaborator Chilka Tufe, who are now in a band called Pangilef, met up with another group of rappers, and one of them is Aman, and they created this video, which is called Hip Hop is the Music. So we have a Mapuche hip hop video with a title in English now, and there's multiple languages in this film, in this music video. I want to call them films, but they're music videos. To me, they're films. And I'm gonna show you just a segment of this, and then we can wrap and have some questions.
2019, Hamburgo, desde el sótano de la B5.
Chilka Tufe, Aman, Jasne Wen.
كلاتكم سوات هيب هوب تفوتو.
Kinye Molfun, Kinye Ayun, Kinye Mongen.
Fui prisionero desde chico, pero me costó salir. Las cadenas que me ataban me impedían el vivir. No sentía ni sabía la fuerza que vive en mí. Pensé morir, pero al final decidí seguir.
Hablo de mí, pero al mismo tiempo hablo de miles
que a través del bombo y caja dejaron de ser giles, introduciéndose en un mundo de colores, abriendo ojos, cambiando y forjando actitudes. A través de las heridas penetro luz en el alma. A través del desahogo y melodía encuentro calma.
En una sociedad de codos y patadas, fascistas, sexistas,
De gente desclasada, el hip hop es de pobre, no es de la clase alta, no alcanza para la mente.
de raza privilegiada,
El hip hop es de pobre, no es de la clase alta, no alcanza para la mente.
de raza privilegiada.
Marginadas, marginados, se toman la palabra, llenan espacios donde antes no existía nada. Esto no es juego de machito, la unión hace la fuerza, dualidad presente, combinación perfecta. Porque un sistema sin sentido, cuando te entregáis al capitalismo termináis vencido. Que no nos salgan con cuestiones, seguimos siendo dueños de nuestras decisiones. Esta medicina antipolicía, contra gobiernos chanta y toda su porquería. Esclavos ya no somos, somos vidas que se unen a través de un movimiento que los sueños no consumen.
Hip hop is the music, hip hop is my living. Hip hop is the music, hip hop is my living. Hip hop is the music, hip hop is my living. Hip hop is the music, hip hop is my living.
Salí para la calle, allí me encontré con mi flor, con mi gente, mi palabra también. El rap me enseñó a caminar a mi manera, rapera, villadera, apurría. También me encontré con el dolor y la rabia por la mala costumbre del que tienen de matar.
Este sistema enfermo tiene que caer. Quieren más poder entre nosotros, lo van a perder.
Depende de uno comenzar a crecer. Primero creo en mí, luego en mi gente. De allí para adelante acepté mis emociones, validé mis pensamientos, me junté con los leones, buscando la mapu, mirando desde el cerro, recibiendo el legüen de mis raíces y mis ancestros.
Recibiendo el legüen de mis raíces, mis ancestros.
All right, so in closing, we see this Mapuche cultural continuity expressed through these hip hop videos, through the use of the language, which is not just the language of Mapuzungun, but the expression of the language through poetry and multivocality. We see we hear the music and we see the deployment of the musical instruments of the Mapuche culture. We see the apparel, the traditional dress, the textiles, and the backdrops. We see cultural practices. We see Mapuche locations and settings, but also urban and rural settings. We see community collaboration and participation, and we have behind the scenes a lot of collective production because the rappers are not necessarily the filmmakers. And in terms of the innovation that this emergence of the Mapuche hip hop and the music videos, we see a mix of styles of musical genres within the music. We see the use of archival material appearing in the videos. We see the juxtaposition of Mapuche contemporary identity with this urban and rural settings. We see a critique of Chilean society that excludes Mapuche. We see the education that excludes Mapuche and the media that excludes Mapuche, all addressed in some of the lyrics. And we see the adaptations that Mapuche artists have been doing with the global language of hip hop. And now we see them participating in an intercultural and transnational musical community. So thank you, Chaltumay. Thank you very much.
Amanda, that was so very interesting. I mean, really it is, and it's a very relevant topic nowadays. And even we have a comment in the chat, and Michael says that there is, he made a comparison between the Mapuche and the Mayan. Has Yucateco Maya rapper named Pat Boy, and hip hop seems to strike a chord among many people as a form of self-expression, which could be a comparison between Mapuche hip hop and Maya, for instance, or other indigenous communities that might use it as a form of artistic expression, which is very, very interesting. Thank you so much. And yes, we do have questions. Marilyn is asking, are governmental documents available in Mapuche language, and especially because a number of these refer to environment, are Mapuche consulted regarding climate change?
I think there's an increasing number of documents coming out that are being translated. The Mapuche languages, we see some translations in some airports, in some banks, and some cultural centers. It's just starting to happen. And definitely there's a strong contingent of Mapuche leadership involved in sort of a the international indigenous movement that started forming from the 1970s onward. The first delegation that went to Geneva to speak to the United Nations, a group of indigenous leaders, included a Mapuche indigenous leader. And Nilo Cayuqueo, who is Mapuche from Argentina, has been really active and a fixture at the United Nations Forum on Indigenous Peoples that convenes every year. So there's definitely an awareness, and a lot of people are seeking out Mapuche perspectives around land preservation, but you have to think that these territories have been defended because so many people have wanted to extract from them. So approaching Mapuche scholars, artists, cultural exponents, we have to be very careful to also not be extractive of them. So now the Western world wants to listen. Now they want to learn about relationality with Mother Earth. And now they want to listen to Indigenous peoples. But Indigenous peoples the message has been consistent. It's certain parties that have not been listening and the government that has been actively silencing. So what I love about this is there's a great amount of pride and joy in the culture. The message kind of stays the same and amplifies, but it's the approach. It's not always about being combative, which is the perception that the media has built of any kind of Mapuche statement. So I think this diversity is really important for Chileans, Argentinians, and the world to understand that there's a richness and a content and a culture behind this, a really, really rich culture. And within that, yes, there are definitely strategies that can help save our planet. But it's also about respecting a culture and its own in its own right.
Yes, that is true. And this experience is not much dissimilar from other indigenous tribes, although perhaps seeking for this perspective is still not always sincere on behalf of the government. It may be a political fashion. Sometimes it happens, and people are not sure which is which until they're sure to open up and give their views sincerely. So it's complicated. But can you say that there is an improvement between the relationship with Mapuche and the Chilean government in recent years?
Well, in the first filmmaker that I mentioned, Jose Ancan, is in the government now. And Janet Payan, who is the second person I mentioned, she's been called to be the Secretary of Culture for the state, the sort of province around the capital of the Mapuche territory. So yeah, now there is active participation. There's actually, the conditions are set that now participation is possible, even though there are discrepancies between certain branches of the government, how they're treating people in certain parts of the territory. There are other parts of the government, like the cultural departments, that are finally making an effort to be more inclusive of Mapuche perspectives by bringing in actual Mapuche people to the government. But you can count them on one hand, the amount of indigenous people that are in the government right now. But there were like 17 indigenous slots in the assembly that drafted a new constitutional draft for the country. And that is the most significant change that we've ever seen. And that draft, which was rejected in a referendum recently, but the draft itself advocated for Chile as a pluricultural country, advocated for indigenous autonomy, and advocated for return and restitution of land to indigenous communities, and that they had their autonomy. And I think that maybe the rest of the country is not ready for that.
Maybe, but still, it's some beginning of this process that we might see something happening soon enough, hopefully. Anyway, Marilyn has a second question for you. Do the people know the origins of hip hop from African American tradition and experience?
Absolutely. When we brought Jazz to New York City to perform and show her video in 2003 to New York City, she played at our closing night, and then she went to the Bronx and played in the Bronx because she wanted to perform where hip hop was born. So yeah, the story of hip hop is known everywhere where the practice is, and the hip hop is a culture, you know. It's not just a musical genre. It comes with visuals, it comes with history, it comes with fashion, and it comes with a certain kind of dance and certain roles like the MC and the DJs. So I think that when you engage with the hip hop universe, you have to learn the culture. Yeah.
Yeah, and we could see some examples of this in your videos, even in body language and gestures, and all that is part of this culture, and they didn't. It's good. And well, Marilyn responds to that. She loves it, acknowledging, knowing the origins. It's good. And Danielle has a question for you. Are there formal schools for the musical instruments used, or is it passed from generation to generation through oral traditions and in the communities themselves?
I would say the latter for the most part, but there are definitely, because of the demand, maybe in the markets, every city has a marketplace, and there are markets that sell to tourists or to visitors copies of the traditional instruments, somewhat functional musical instruments, but they're not always the quality of the actual instruments. And the instruments, such as the kultrun, has a certain ceremony to its use. It's not just decorative. And I find that a lot of people buy the drum and hang it up in their room. And the drum is alive and has a part in the ceremony. It's part of the whole ritual ensemble that has to be present. But there is Huayquil, who was the acoustic session that I showed. He's preparing a documentary that will also talk about instrument making, because it's really important to continue the tradition and to learn how to make the instruments. I want to riff on Dende a little bit. Dende talking about the history of the instruments and tracing them back to Africa or tracing them to certain musical traditions. It's the same with the Mapuche instruments. They all have a role within the culture. And they, like I was saying, so much of the work begins with the call of the chuchuca. And if you will allow me, I will see if I can show you what it looks like. So this is a chuchuca, right? And it's you blow it through here. That's just a sound, but this is the call, this is the gathering, this is the invitation to come meet, and that's a traditional use of that instrument. And you hear a lot of the hip-hop videos beginning with that call to pay attention, to go somewhere.
Well, other than the chuchuca and the kultrun, which ones other traditional instruments?
We cut off the video of Huayquil before he plays the pifilca, which is that one-tone flute that has kind of a ragged sound. And that's an interesting, it works almost like a percussion instrument in terms of the sound. I mean, it is a flute, but it plays one note. So that note has rhythmic power. That note works by iteration. So oftentimes there will be two people, one with one flute, one with another flute, and they have slightly different sounds, and they'll alternate. 1, 2, 1, 2. But that creates its own musical structure. So just getting into the practice of knowing how to get decent sound out of the instruments, and then knowing how they're supposed to function, and that relationality is really important within the instruments. Every part of it has a role, and the flute played with another person requires this engagement and coordination with that other person.
That is so interesting.
There's also bells and shakers, and there are, those are some of the most important instruments.
These combined with guitars and bass. I mean, this is really amazing.
And in the case of Huayquil and his band, also with the cajon from Peru. The Peruvian cajon is also in that song, which is the country north of Chile is Peru. So that's inviting the whole Andean and Afro-diasporic world into this musical production. And I want to especially thank Jason, Huayquil, and Luanco, who I've been lucky to show their works and work with them. I'm really honored to.
Well, thank you so very much, Amanda. Thank you. It was really so engaging, so interesting, and in some cases, it's eye-opening because, as you said, people don't know enough about contemporary music genres among the Mapuche people or any other indigenous people for that matter. They either know the traditional or the contemporary, but the combination of the two is it's a very interesting trend. So thank you very much for sharing This was very, very rich.
Chaltumay, thank you very much for your interest, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Well, I hope that I will see you and everybody else tomorrow for the second part of it, which will be another 2 very interesting and very engaging presentations. So, Amanda, this slide that Marcy is showing now is for the exhibit that we currently have in the Folklife Center, because it is a comparison between Mapuche and Maya textiles. That is why I wanted her to show it when you have your presentation. And there is additional information in the exhibit about the history of and the culture of the Mapuche, about mythology, language, some of the rituals that would be associated with the textiles that they created. This exhibit actually arrived from Chile to us, and it's going back to Chile in 2 days. So if somebody wants to see it, you have 2 days, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. We are closing on Sunday, is the last day. So Marcy, would you like to share something else with us before we wrap it up?
Well, I want to drop this in the chat very quickly so everyone has the link. And well, I certainly want to thank our guests this evening. It's been absolutely wonderful, and I've been dancing along myself. Do you want to talk about do you want to talk about a little bit more about this this program?
You mean the entire project?
The weekend, what everyone can see this weekend, the Threads of Time.
Weekend, yes, they can see this exhibit. It provides a comparison between the 2 different types of textiles. And it is very interesting because, as Amanda told you, Mapuche live in the central southern part of Chile. Mayans from Guatemala, very different geographic locations. So they use very different materials. Mapuche people work mostly in wool, actually exclusively in sheep wool, and work on a vertical loom, which you can see on the slide in front of you. While Mayan people work in cotton and silk mostly, and women work on backstrap looms, while men use big size floor looms to create large sizes of fabrics. We also have on display a Chilean horsehair miniatures that are created in the town of Rari, and they've been made a part of the human living treasures, which is a program of UNESCO. The entire city was recognized back in 2010, and they send us examples of these horsehair miniatures to display, which is another fiber, but just different look, different techniques. It's a basketry weaving technique, but they are amazing. They're amazing. So if you have time, stop by tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
Absolutely incredible. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide, which is sharing the information of Dunde and Amalia, but I put that in the chat. I also made a note in the chat that if you go to your documents and Zoom, you should be able to find, as if your Zoom is set as such, you should be able to find the entire chat. If not, reach out to Obetta. I'll make sure she has a copy of the chat and she can send it along to you. I also want to let everyone know that we will meet again tomorrow at 3 p.m. You can go to WheatonArts.org and find this schedule in case you need it again tomorrow. And I'd also like to invite the teachers that may be in attendance to reach out to Iveta at ipiergova@wheatonarts.org. This is teachers can, this is a professional development opportunity, and teachers can receive a certificate for 4 hours with attendance and engagement. And anything else before we sign off, Iveta?
I will be happy if we have teachers in the room. We are accredited to give those certificates, so I'll send it immediately. You just please, if you put my email in the chat as well, they can email me their names and schools, and I will prepare the certificates for the teachers.
Absolutely. Putting it in there now. Great. Well, I'm going to move right over to the thank you and encourage people to visit us again at WheatonArts.org anytime. And we'll just wait a minute here so that people can copy that email of yours or anything else in the chat. But I will sign off and say good night, everyone. And thank you all. This is just a wonderful program. Good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.